Hello and welcome to part 2 of the truth about being gay, what no one has the guts to tell you. Warning. It's a long road. It's a very long, hard, lonely road. And wherever you are on that road, it's beyond at this point. It really is. The reason that I'm doing this is because somewhere out there, and I know because people in the gay world are reaching out to me and booking me for readings and chats, and I do get to connect with other people and be of service to them, help them get out of relationships or help them get out of issues where they've been trapped by people. A lot of younger gay men do get trapped by older gays as well. And there is a lot of grooming culture that also happens within gays. A lot of this daddy-son dynamic is nothing more than just abuse and pedophilia at this point within the community. You'll see that a lot. It's just a lot of BDSM, a lot of kind of Satanism, kind of all operates under like abuse and hurt and pain, and all of this type of dynamic always really plays out with gays. A lot of it is fundamentally, just cutting it really simply, a lot of young gay men that don't have good relationships with their biological fathers that are trying to recreate that dynamic with an older man. So I have seen that a lot as well. That's why twink porn is the most Googled porn in the world with gays, because it's all predatory based. I have done videos on that explaining that, but that video got taken down actually because it was very confronting. But yeah, got to be careful with what I share here. But I'm going to share something with you now. So coming from the country as a young man that was trying to figure myself out back in the day, I'm taking you way back now to when I was 18. I just turned 19. I caught a V-Line bus from the country and I came down to Melbourne from country Victoria. I lived all around the Yarra Valley, and I was very secretive about this because coming from a country town and being a gay man myself was very, very dangerous. I did live actually in a town where a young man was bashed to death in an alleyway behind the side of the NAB bank. And so I'd heard the stories, and obviously this is back in the day when it was way more underground than it is now. Like, it wasn't just like hiding out in public toilets. It was like the shame that would be bestowed upon you if the town found out that you were gay, that a family had a gay son, could actually destroy a business in a small town. And the shame that brought families was very, very hard. So back in the day, back in my father's day and age, there were a few gay men that I had heard of that it was found out that they were younger and they were attracted to men. They were basically sent away, kind of paid off, so to speak, as it was called. So they were paid off to go to boarding school and basically just stay away from the town to save their family's face for that. So yeah, a lot of that goes on. And of course, that's not easy. And if you're growing up with a very, very strict family that's absolutely against it, and you've got no one to turn to, suicide rates in gay men has always been super, super high. Suicide rates in country men has always been very, very high. So I was a country gay boy coming out and realizing who I was. And I knew that I didn't want to hide and pretend. I didn't want to have a girlfriend and just use her as a cover, so I couldn't show myself to my family and friends, which is really, really cruel. A lot of bisexual and closeted men do that, by the way. And I have mentioned before that it is very, very, very bad when a man hides who he is, and rather than just own his truth or just live as a single man, he thinks that he can try and overturn his true nature by pretending and disregarding his real self. So basically using his wife as a cover and then even having kids. This is a very, very dangerous thing that happens. And I can talk about this, and I have a lot of older clients that reach out to me, a lot of clients that have come out later in their life and really regret it, or they regret what they've done with having families and kids that they should never really have had, or the trauma and the absolute anger and disdain and devastation that leaves their wife when she finds out their real truth, that she felt used and that she was, just not really who we wanted to be with, just to cover. So this stuff really, really hurts, and it really destroys families, okay? So you will see that as well. And I do offer counseling, like spiritual counseling for this type of thing. And I understand that different time periods, created different levels of trauma and shame. And in some cases, I've had clients that have not been able to tell their family because their mother could have a heart attack, or she could die, or in one case, a client of mine did tell his mum and she actually had a heart attack. So it's really heavy, depending on what country you're in, etc. It's all subject to context. But in the Western world, I'm just explaining this to you as best as I can, because there's so many corridors I could go down with these types of chats, but I'm trying to keep it, reasonably tight for this video. So I came down on the V-Line bus and I met gay men. I started to look at their energy. I started to look at how they communicate with each other, how they relate to each other. And something very fishy was going on in my heart. It felt very off. It felt very phony, and it felt very, very fake. The way that gay men talk to each other, they put on this kind of fruity voice, little man bags. A lot of them, they date and marry other gays that look like them, like physiologically look like them, same height, same hair color, kind of like twinsies. That's all connected to narcissism as well, like wanting to fuck a version of yourself, I've noticed as well. And there's very, very low emotional empathy is the first thing that I would say I noticed around a lot of gay men. They have this kind of aloofness to them. A lot of them, you try and talk about something of depth or meaning, and they just kind of go, yeah, I'm not interested in this. I don't understand. This is really heavy. I'm just gonna go. They do this deflection thing. A lot of them have an entitlement and a real disillusionment with reality. This is something that have come to understand as cognitive dissonance, which is what really rules a lot of the gay scene. You don't need someone logically to spell it out to you, as obvious as it is that a man doesn't have a vagina in his asshole. Okay? That's not an organ that was designed for sex. Obviously, it's a body part that was designed for something else. So over time, you'll notice it's not really sex that they're having. It's kind of like mutilation. It's stretching a body part past its natural functional range. Of course, parasites and infections and all of these types of things, incontinence, all of these types of things are a very, very real thing that no one would dare speak about, because it's that sacred cow. No one is allowed to talk about this stuff because they'll be branded as homophobic or they'll be branded as hateful. But when you're in it and you completely accept who you are, you can't live in this kind of made up fake world, and that is dysfunctional and very, very dangerous psychologically, spiritually, and physiologically dangerous to your health, and not ever, in my right mind, of course I would want to talk about this because I have the courage to do this. That's why I'm saying it to you right now. And that's why you won't find many videos on YouTube or out there online that talk just as candidly as I am right now, because people are too scared. They're too silenced to tell the truth. They are fear of being cancelled or fear of being punished for just sharing obvious truths. Okay, so if you don't know, a lot of gay men, they, in order to have anal sex with each other, there's always been a huge drug culture. And drug culture always leads into breaking down of the mind and the body and the self, because obviously, for obvious reasons, drugs are very, very addictive. Most gay men that I've known in my life have all struggled with some level of addiction, some level of trying to get off out of the pain of life and numbing it through alcoholism. Sex addiction is obviously the biggest one. And of course, drugs, whether that's crystal methamphetamine or whether it was taking tablets back in the day. But the most common one you'll find these days is something called amyl nitrate, it's been around for a while, which is basically a man, I know this sounds crazy if you've never heard this, but men sniffing like a DVD cleaner, like a leather cleaner. It's in a little bottle that usually needs to be stored in the refrigerator and kept at a lower temperature. But it basically gives you a rush as it kills all the brain cells in your brain. So a lot of that, it's called poppers. So a lot of that is also part of gay sex. So what I'm saying here is, it's pretty obvious, which yet again, no one wants to point it out. The truth is that, if you're needing to emaciate yourself, if you're needing to change like your like consciousness in your mind to have sex with someone, what kind of sex, you've got to ask, like, what kind of sex are you really having? How can that be healthy? How could that be stable? Because it's like the act of making love with someone or having sex with someone is connection. So the act itself is a consummation of union of connection. But the other person or you or whoever is, if they alter themselves into a different state of consciousness, they're not even going to be present with you during sex. So what's the point? They're just using you to get off. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's reducing someone to, yet again, the lowest aspect, the lowest common denominator of who that human is, which is just a dick or a body part. And that's why relationships in the gay world don't work, because they're all generally based off this, okay? For a real active, loving, caring, stable relationship to actually last, it has to be built. It can be done, but not from here. It has to be built in a place based off respect, not abuse. Okay, and that's the difference. So real relationships are built in the mind and they're built in the heart. The higher the mind, the harder it will be to find a connection. The bigger the heart, the harder it will be to find a connection. That's why a lot of gay men that I knew back in the day that were young and around my age, a lot of them disappear. A lot of them end up in country towns, or they retract or retreat after a certain age of just being chewed up and spat out, really. And they all end up isolated with a lot of mental health problems. A lot of them don't work. A lot of them can't really contribute to society. A lot of them end up very, very damaged, particularly young gays, because young gays that come into the scene are very easily groomed by older men. An example of that I can share with you, or I could share some stories, but I probably can't here. But if you want to see how bad this is, I would suggest find out for yourself. Get a Grindr account, set up a faceless profile, and add your age as the age of 18 and just leave it at that. You will be shocked at the level of interest you will have from older gay people. You will be absolutely shocked. The reason of this is because of the innocence that you represent, and how easily you'll be able to be manipulated by older gays. So there's a lot of grooming. And as I was younger, I didn't really understand the level of grooming until I had an experience where let's put it this way. If I was on stage right now with a microphone and I was giving a presentation to an audience full of gay men, not people that identify as queer, gay, homosexual men that own their truth, that are based in reality, I would actually hold the microphone up to my mouth and say, how many of you, hands up, honest truth, honest to fuck truth, how many of you have been groomed? Hands up. I would have an audience full of hands, if you're being honest. All right, then if I would stand on the stage and if I ever said just hypothetically speaking, if I held the microphone to my mouth and said, how many of you have been raped? I would have a sea of hands. So a lot of rape culture is in gay culture because with the grooming and the abuse, which is all generally seen as hot and turns people on, it's such a trauma-based thing. And so when you can't agree, like say for example, if you're having sex with someone and you're on some level of drug, you're not going to be in a state that would be ultimately consensual if you were sober. So it influences your choices, if you understand what I'm saying. And this is also something that is very deeply preyed upon. Okay? Now, one of the things I want to share with you, if you're looking at the thumbnail of these two videos that I'm uploading here, part 1 and part 2, is that I chose that photo for a reason. Because we live in a society that now unearned value is competing with earned value. And so these days, something that looks aesthetically pretty like something will have a higher chance of attention rate than something that doesn't now. I'm just saying that. That's not something that's narcissistic. It's just the truth. And that's why when I talk to other gay men in the world and I say, I've been single for a long period of time, or I explain some of this to them on a very light level, maybe not at this level of depth that I'm speaking now, is they go, "You're single? You?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, because I know what I know. I know what I'm sharing with you right now. This is a very, very tough pill for people to swallow." Okay, so I'm very aware of that, and that's why I chose that photo, which is also taking off the table of me coming at this and sharing this level of information with you freely now isn't because I'm a bitter person that can't get sex or can't get attention or can't get a fuck. That's not what I'm doing this for. Ultimately, I have, a very high level of consciousness. Okay, and that's the truth. And humans are all on different levels of consciousness. All right, we all, and that's what it is. So this isn't me coming from a place of not being able to partake in the dysfunction of the community and then becoming mad at it for it. It's me sharing with you what was there all along, being born the way that I look, the way that I do, the mind that I have, and then me choosing to wake the fuck up to gay culture and say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not partaking in this. All right? I'm not going to be discarded by someone. I'm not going to be used. I'm not going to be groomed. I'm not going to have meaningless, frivolous relationships with people that end up nowhere and the person ghosts you. I'm not doing this anymore. I took myself out of the gay scene as soon as I could, because I knew, like I said in part 1 of this chat, I was dipping my toe into something that was demonic and something that was poison, pure fucking poison. All right? And a lot of them, when I look at a lot of these older gays, they're lonely. Their lives are empty. They're sad. They're tragic. They're fucking tragic. And to me, it's not really a life that built love and built reality. It was just exactly the opposite. And also as well, if you get older and you don't subscribe to an aesthetic of like looking like a daddy, or if you don't have money, you will be cast out. You will be absolutely discarded, okay? Because your value is what you look like. Your value is how big your dick is. All right, it's just the truth. You won't be participating in this society of this abuse society of gay culture if you don't meet the prerequisite of what it needs you to be to enter it. Okay, that's why a lot of older gay men that come out later in their life, they will have a lot of like sexual liberation where they want to kind of make up for lost time, where they want to go out and kind of taste test a lot of the sexual experiences that they wouldn't have had they when they're in their marriage, or have three ways and all that type of thing. But ultimately you get to a point where I am now, where it's just empty. It's like, getting a blowjob is a great thing. We're all fucking human. I understand that, right? But a life of blowjobs, I like what's the good analogy? I like a donut. Who doesn't? Okay. You like a donut? Sure. But a life of donuts is a sugary, meaningless hell. All right. Come to me after feeding me donuts for like years. Do you think I'll be happy? Do you think I'll be like healthy? No. Okay. So there's a lot of core wounding that ends up because of this. So it's all like pleasure seeking over which is compensation for connection. So everyone's trying to like fuck each other to get a high, then the high wears off, and then you're back to being alone again. All right. This is why it's like, it's exhausting. All right. So I'm going to share this story with you, right? Please bear with me, because a lot of this is not easy to talk about. It's really hard. I'm just trying to show up for this chat and be real with you so you can get to know me and get to understand what I'm talking about and what's really going on here. When I came to the gay world and I was standing at the gay bar, there was a kind of like a party of sorts. And I do very specifically remember it wasn't like a circuit party as they're called these days, where it's like a sex party, where it's like legally the space or the hiring area where they've got the group. It's like they're licensed to actually have sex on premises, where men will just like fuck each other on the dance floor or go upstairs and fuck each other wherever on a beanbag or in a dark room somewhere. It was a bar called The Market. If you know what I'm talking about and you've lived on Chapel Street or you've lived in Melbourne, you'll remember a bar that was rocking back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And it was literally that. It was called The Market, and its symbol of the bar was actually a shopping trolley. And they'd even have things called late night shopping, like where they would open up that bar at late night hours on certain days where you could literally go shopping for another person. You're picking them off a shelf to bring them home and fuck them. Okay, so that was all part of it. This is even this was pre-Grindr or pre-anything around like apps and stuff like that. So I remember being there at a very young age, and after having like very spiritual experiences in myself and just being a bit spiritually different to a lot of people, and regardless of their damn sexuality, it didn't matter. I remember standing at the bar looking at all of these men, and they'd have all their shirts off and they'd all be like pumped up, going to the gym, and they're all kind of moving together. And it was one very specific night I'll never forget. And I want you to know I was not on any level of prescription medication. I had not been drinking. I wasn't under any influence of drug. I remember standing at the bar and walking into a group of men on the dance floor. And I've heard very similar experiences of this as well. And what started to happen was a very, very foul smell started to come up, and it was coming up from the ground. And I remember it, and as I have remembered this and I have recalled this in previous videos, it smelt like dog shit. It just smelt so bad, like raw sewage. And it was a very, very busy night at this particular club. At the time, it was like a Saturday night. It was 2:30 in the morning. And it was very tight, very shoulder to shoulder, lots of people moving against each other, and the music's very loud. It's very primal. If you know anything about occultism or spirituality, you'll know that music can get people into like frenzy-like states. You'll know that music has vibrations and frequencies which can also access realms of consciousness. And yes, it can access realms within the lower astral. Okay, I was walking around in all of these men, just looking at them, and all of a sudden I started to see the demons in their faces. Their faces were all distorted, okay? Their faces were like long tongues sticking out, sharp pointy teeth, very angular type noses, very exaggerated jawlines, all like just, it was, and began to understand that what I was actually looking at was the astral body of these men. And as they were all in this space, they were all objectifying each other and using each other and bastardizing each other in this space where they were all in an act of inversion on a level that was like it was like being in the middle of a bunch of demons that were all in a giant bonparty, like a bonfire, like a pyre or a fire of some sorts. It was very, very powerful, and it was very, very evil. And I remember feeling this thing where suddenly I was just like a helpless little lamb surrounded by wolves. And I very specifically remember catching this for a few seconds, and the smell was actually the atrophication of the soul. It was not the smell of like someone having, shit on the floor or something, which I'm sure has happened in gay clubs. I've heard stories. I've even dated people that ran clubs as well that were gay bars back in my early 20s. So anything kind of goes. This was strange because it was over nearly over 20 years ago, but I never got over that first moment of, I would actually call it a warning sign from the spirits, from the angels or from the spiritual world. And I'm not an overly spiritual person in a conventional Catholic sense, but until I started to understand the occult and understand what was happening here with all of these people all behaving this way. And so I went into the bathroom, into the toilets there, and splashed water on my face and looked up at my face and really had to look within myself and go, all of these people are narcissistic. There's something really, really wrong here fundamentally with these people. This is not some big gay family where everyone loves each other and we all accept each other. This is ugly dead comes to fucking play. And I was right in the middle of it. And I remember just getting my stuff, getting my jacket, and just getting the fuck out of there. All right? And that's the truth of what I began to see as I was partaking in this culture that was all about a mix of abuse with pleasure. And so abuse and pleasure is fundamentally like dom-sub dynamics, which if you don't know, a dom is someone who enjoys, like a dominant, enjoys enforcing their will or enforcing power over another person, their sub. And it's a relationship that is obviously as old as time. It's a master and a sub. One party gets off on using the other and abusing them and inflicting pain on them, and the other enjoys being used as the center point of the dom's pleasure. So each one gets something out of it. So it's sadomasochism. So a big aspect of gay sex is obviously it hurts. Anyone who lies about that, you're not fooling anyone. That's why you're taking poppers to reduce the pain. So if it hurts you, how can that be good for you? So it's always been this battle between pleasure seeking and pain. And so masters and slaves and all of this type of infantilization, all of this dynamic all exists in the lower astral, which is also known as the ectoplasm, which became hell. Okay? And so I have mentioned this in previous videos, but BDSM and shadow sex is all like a lot of what gay culture really kind of is, that they bestow upon themselves as a thing to behold of perfection and looking perfect and being beautiful, but underneath it, it's rotten to the core, like an apple that's just rotten full of worms. Okay, I know this is heavy, but I'm just sharing some of this with you. So you will see a lot of pain, a lot of this level of abuse and culture really damages people because people become victimized by psychopathic and sociopathic and narcissistic people that really enjoy hurting people. All right. So when you lower the way you see someone and reduce them to a very low level, you're removing like the soul of them. When you objectify someone, you're turning them into an object. You're not looking at them as a human. And so there's a lot of this dynamic which plays out in gay culture, which is not healthy. It's not good for anyone. It hurts people. It damages people. And then that person that's hurt starts to play that out on someone else. So even if it goes for sexual dynamics, it's also like someone love bombed you and then suddenly ghosted you. And it's very destabilizing. There's only so many times a human can go through that where you start to really lose your sense of worth, because it's like every time you try to connect with someone, you're just met with someone who's just playing with you like a toy or a doll that could be discarded when, they only message you when they are, horny or when they're bored or when they feel like it. And so they're just basically taking advantage of you. And that's why I will say, please listen to me. And I'm speaking from my heart here, right? Is that I've had these experiences my whole life. And that's why I would never, ever, and I will always stand by this. If you're listening to me now and you're a gay man and you own your truth, it's very important that you come out and own your truth as soon as you can, or if it's safe to do so. Don't let anyone hide you, okay? It's one thing to be kept safe from violence. That's one thing. But it's a completely different ball game when someone is just hiding you because they are hiding themselves and who they are, okay? So you're here to shine. You're not here to be pulled back into the closet with someone who's hiding by someone else's insecurity and lack of truth. And that's why it's really important to tell the truth, okay? It's really important to get out of the shadows and living in the shadows. It's really important to show up for yourself in an authentic way. And I've learnt this from being a gay man myself. It's very, very important that we own our truth. Even if the gay scene and being gay is massively dysfunctional, it's more, trust me, it's more dysfunctional if you play games and make believe and you lead people on in relationships where you don't really love them and you don't really want them. Because you wouldn't want someone doing that to you if secretly they weren't even fucking straight. All right? Straight up truth. This stuff, when it comes out and your family finds your porn history, or when you're uncovered, and you will be, don't think you won't, you will, it's very, very hard, because the further down that road of inauthenticity you've gone, the more damage it's going to create on people's psyches, and they will never trust you again. It's just truth. Right? I've seen men that have come out and they've hung themselves. I've seen men kill themselves over this. This stuff really, really hurts. It causes so much damage that years and years in a therapist's office would never fix it, had they have just owned their truth first. Because think of it this way, when you own who you are, when you meet someone straight up the first time, you're showing them who you are. So now they can get to know the real you, and now you can build a real relationship with them. If you don't do that, then how could you expect them to be real with you when you're not even showing them who you even are? They're only going to be interacting with the mask that you're wearing for them. Do you understand? So you can't minimize who you are. You can't compartmentalize who you are. This is something that I see a lot in the spiritual world. When people come to me, a lot of the time people have compartmentalized themselves. That is why I will stand by this right now. I would never, ever trust a closeted gay man or a bisexual man, ever. Super dangerous. Because what you're doing particularly with the closeted man, is he is benefiting from living a life of privilege in a majority world, right? And then secretly he is using, so a lot of closeted men use gay men for sex because gay men are lower in society than they are. And the gay man is the physical embodiment of the part of himself that he's trying to hide. Do you understand? So that's why it's very, very dangerous. And I will always recommend that gay men never, ever get involved with a closeted man. Because what will happen is he is using you, and it could never go anywhere. It could never be a stable relationship ever, because he isn't even acknowledging his truth about who he really is. So it's just devaluing you, okay? And so that's the truth of it. And I've been in this state many times, right? Many, many times. So it's really bad, because what happens is they pull the gay man that's owning his truth back, regressing him backwards and inviting him inadvertently into an underground lifestyle of hiding and shame. And that's not where we need to be. Okay, yes, it's dysfunctional, but we don't need that. I will share something with you. 10 years ago, I can't believe it's been 10 years. It's gone so quick. 10 years ago, I met someone who I began to fall in love with, and he love bombed me. He courted me, and he listened to me, and he showed interest in me, and he had a lot of the values and a lot of the what's the word? Not ideological, but a lot of the things that I idolize, that I wish I could be or I want to be. You know, in relationships, when we connect with someone, ultimately we're wanting to take a part of someone into ourselves, okay? And so he was, very charming, very handsome. He was very smart, and all of the things that I'm attracted to in a person. The only problem is that he was hiding behind a faceless profile on his Scruff at the time. If you don't know what Scruff is a hookup or dating app. It's really kind of a hookup app, just like Grindr or Growler, Whistler. Like for the straights, it's probably more like Tinder or Hinge or whatever. But back then, his profile was hidden. And so I courted this person, and I was very vulnerable with him. And I had suspected that he had a family and a wife and kids. So when I would meet with him, it would always be at my place, and it would always be on his terms, because that's how it was. And I knew in my heart that something was off, but I fell for him and I trusted him. I really trusted him. And of course, when we're talking about this level of being a gay man, we're talking about life and death stuff here. We're talking about like sexual health stuff, right? It's serious, okay? And so I trusted him. And back then, PrEP was kind of a thing. If you don't know what PrEP is, you can probably look it up. But it was something that really I thought was real. And so it's very, very cruel. And what he did was, on my birthday, I turned 30 and I went out with him. I had a great time with him. And he ghosted me, just suddenly withdrew. And so what had happened was, it's like building a world with someone that made them feel safe, and they get the high off doing that. I now understand the Machiavellian scale of psychopathy. It's a power play where they build something with you, bring you into a high state, and then they drop you and they abandon you and they just ignore you, which is a state that narcissists use it's basically called the devaluation phase. So if you know about this, I have talked about this before, and I didn't understand it back then because I was still quite green. I didn't understand what I know now, is that a lot of closeted men, they justify sleeping with gay men behind their girlfriend or wife's back because technically it's not cheating in their eyes, because it's with a man and not with a woman, and there's less risk, or there's no risk of pregnancy. So it's just them using a gay man as a doll or a toy. And of course, the moment it gets real and the moment feelings start to happen and the moment it starts to build, they can't go anywhere with that. So the best thing to do is just abandon you, and they don't have to have any accountability. They don't have to actually send you a message saying, look, I really like you, but I see you more as a friend. They don't have to let you down easy. They just get rid of you, because they hate who they are, and you're that embodiment of themselves. If they loved who they were, they would have just owned their truth from the start. So it's like someone who's playing the best of both worlds. And with humans, I have mentioned this before, humans are all based on levels. youth, wealth, race, beauty, social status, all of these things come into play in any relationship dynamic on any level with humans and other humans. So they benefit by doing this and playing this game. It's very, very bad, super dangerous. And that interaction after what he did to me, he also gave me a fake phone number as well. So I was actually messaging him thinking that it was him, and it was actually someone else's number, because he could never actually tie himself to me on any level that was real, because that means he could be caught out and he couldn't risk that. For a lot of gay men, they would actually think that's hot. A lot of them have a lot of such low level of self-worth that a lot of their physical appearance and a lot of their sexual prowess is really all they have in terms of self-worth. And so a lot of gay men will really not like being called a faggot in real life down the street by someone like a passerby. But if they were sucking cock on their knees, they like being called a faggot because it turns them on. Do you understand? So we're dealing with an inverted mind that likes to selectively be offended by things as well. And that's another aspect which I deal with in my spiritual counseling, when people try to deflect things or compartmentalize things for their convenience. It doesn't work well. It does not work well, okay? Believe me, it's not gonna work. So that experience which I'm sharing as well, other than the nightclub experience, it led me into such a downward spiral that I didn't really eat anything for the next 2 weeks. I lost a lot of weight very quickly, and I got into a state one morning where I actually made a noose and walked out onto my balcony and put my neck in the noose, because that's how low and how damaged I was after what he did to me. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Because it's one thing to just tell someone, I just want to have sex with you and it's all good, let's just have a play. But another to really lead someone on and court them and buy them, a present and write a card saying, I'm really enjoying getting to know you, Lucas, and I really want to get to know you better, and my boots are underneath your bed, and really kind of bring someone into a state of them falling in love with you, getting the thrill of attracting someone that to get them to fall in love with you, and then just getting the high of it and just completely abandoning that person. It's actually very, very narcissistic and very psychotic to do that to another human. And if you're out there listening and you've had this done to you, it takes such a long time to try and recover from that level of mental break from another person doing that to you. All right, it is the most cruelest thing you can do to someone is give them hope. It wasn't until later in my life I began to understand, after lots of spiritual counseling and therapy and understanding myself and where I fit in the scheme of things with myself and having the gifts that I do and the insight that I have, was that I didn't love him. I only loved what he represented, because he was the embodiment of everything that I'll never be, that I wish I could have been or could be. So he's a family man, he's respectable, he's got kids, he's got this whole other beautiful world, and I'm looking through a window into a world that I'll never have. And he's got that world and he's just abusing it because he's greedy and he's selfish. And I didn't know any different, okay? So that's hard, because one of the things that I'm facing as a gay man is I'm not going to have any kids. When I die, my genetic code is out, it's gone. The last of me. When I die, that's it. Okay, there's no me out there walking in the world. And I've acquired all this love and knowledge, and I've got all this to give to. I've got no one to give it to, because I'm gay. I'm a genetic dead end, and I know that. And I know that a child needs a mother and father. They just do. I'm not that selfish. I understand that. Okay, adoption is different, but I'm very selective, and that's going to have to be looked at with context as well, because I don't think that a lot of gays buy kids as like handbags to put on their Instagram, and that's really fucked as well. All right, so I hope this is all making sense. I could go on and do a part 3. I mean, should I go on and do a part 3 and explain to you why most gay men are bottoms, why most gay men go that way. I could go into that a little bit more and really unpack that. But I think at this point, you get where I'm going with this, and you understand the dangers and the truths that I'm trying to share here. That's why when clients would come to see me back in the day, particularly younger men that were struggling by being used or being completely railroaded or head fucked from all of this bullshit, is I would just say, I can see that you need help right now, and you're with someone who's safe, and I'm not going to try and do anything to hurt you, and I'm not going to use you, and I have the intellectual bandwidth to actually explain to you what's really going on here, because I was you back in the day. So I'm going to go put the kettle on, and we'll just sit down and we're going to talk about all of this stuff. I can share my knowledge. Same thing with what I do now with my readings. I can give you the answers. I can show you the path of truth. But if you're unwilling to see that, or if that path is too scary to you, then I can't do anything to get you off your own free will and your own choice. You will meet the consequences of the path that you're taking regardless. So, for example, just in regards to being, gay, if you build a life around sex and kinky fetishes and playing characters and animals and things like that, you will reach a point of emptiness that most gay men really kind of get to, where they look back at their life and see that they've really obtained nothing of value or virtue. It was all just an empty life of like trauma bonding, shame, and just using mechanisms of sex to overcompensate for lack of deep connection. So pleasure seeking, pain seeking, psychological and physical pain, as a way to avoid or fill a hole within themselves that they could never really fill. That's why if you can find a gay man that's able to talk like I am right now, very openly, and can communicate very directly and clearly and explain this and understands it, I think that you will have a level of success with them in a friendship sense, because they're able to articulate all of this dysfunction in a way that is not judging it necessarily, but able to comprehend the level of trauma that one will go through when you're looking at all of this type of stuff. Okay? So whether you believe it or not, sadomasochistic patterns and trauma bonding is really just, it's out there and it's happening. And, for a lot of gay men, particularly bottoms, they won't want to hear this. They're so far indoctrinated and brainwashed into gay culture that this level of chat would completely go over their head. It would be like they're in such a chronic state of trauma bonding, they would never be able to get out of that. All they're looking for is another dick to fuck them. They're looking for someone to use them and play with them like a doll or a toy. And they're just living in this kind of delusion and infantilizing state, which is all cognitive dissonance, which is what a lot of all of this is. It's all playing characters. So in life, when I meet people myself, I would rather say, I'll give you the option up front when I meet you. Do you want to play with the dollies and the teacups? Or do you want me to go put the kettle on the stove and have a real hot cup of tea? Which one do you want? We can play make-believe, which would just be a waste of time, and I don't have that level of time anymore. But if you're interested in talking about the real stuff and the real, coming into a real higher state of consciousness, and talking about why I no longer participate in all of these very dysfunctional dynamics that just go round and round and round in a loop, well then let me sit down and put the kettle on and we can talk about it. Okay, because it is, in a lot of ways, it is a very it's a very complex thing. There's a lot of dualities. There's a lot of nuances that exist within this. And for the average mind, they're not going to be able to look at this like I am right now and explain it to you. Okay, so where I'm going in my life now, and people would probably listen to this and just freak out and go, oh, what's going to happen to him? Well, I've reached a point now where I often tell my clients that being born gay perhaps has to be considered rather than a one-way ticket to nothingness. has to be considered a very unique opportunity to present something to the world that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do from a vantage point of being where you are now and who you are. One of these examples I will give you, if you're familiar with the show Game of Thrones, you'll know the character Lord Varys. He was a eunuch, and it was insinuated that, yes, he was abused, and most gay men are sexually abused at birth. There is scientific study which does correlate now to that whole nature versus nurture. Again, any level of scientist or person that does statistics studies on that would be silenced as well. But I'm just sharing from my findings in my life. A lot of them, it's very, very common they were assaulted. Is that he was very dedicated to a force that was kind of above operating on a very low level. So he was very dedicated to the people that he represented. He was very dedicated to his excellence. He didn't prioritize his sexuality as a thing. And I think if you can take the nuance of that character and understand where I'm going with my life, will be that although a conventional relationship in a gay scene sense will never play out for me, because I know that ultimately it leads to complete ruin, I will find other things that keep me fulfilled, like doing these types of videos, doing spiritual consultations and making art, and make that the focus at what I do and make that the biggest part of who I am. All right. So I'm not reducing myself and the complexity of life to something that's very trivial, because life isn't a trivial game that you play. You know, humans are not a game that you can play with and discard when you don't feel like it or you're bored. You know, the human experience is a very complex thing, and there's lots of nuances to it. Okay. And so I want to be around people that take their life seriously and people that don't abuse each other. Okay. So when you look at a lot of all of this, you will see a lot of, over, like I mentioned, a long period of time, it's like a dog on the side of the street that's abandoned, you know, dog shelters. I would actually go out on a limb and say that a lot of gay culture in the gay scene is basically like a big orphanage. It's a lot of people that have been thrown away from their families and have been disowned. A lot of them are just barking and screaming for attention because they can't get it any other way. So they have to kind of make themselves into a spectacle. And this doesn't work long term either, because in order to get fame or get seen, you have to do it from a place of merit. You can't do it from a place of performance. So a lot of gay men, you'll notice, have a very disassociated state with reality, in this terms of, like, they have this idea where they're like, life is a magical garden and I just show up and I'm special and everyone loves me and I'm so special because I suck dick. And it's like, no, you have to work for merit. You have to earn respect. It's not something that you can force onto other people. Okay, that's coming from a place of self. That's coming from a place of ego. That's not coming from a place of love. Okay, so I hope that you understand the difference, which is why you'll never see me at any of these parades. And it's like I mentioned at the start of part one of this chat, a lot of it is so, it's so far gone now that if I was to go to a Mardi Gras parade with a microphone and a camera and just walk around and talk to people there and say, what does this mean to you? What are you doing here tonight? I would have 1,000 responses for a multitude of different reasons that would all counteract each other. So there isn't really, when people say, that's why I don't really use the word gay community. I don't think it was a community back in like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, especially when it came into like HIV and all that type of time period. But I don't see it necessarily as a community. I think that the word community is gone now. And I think that in order to have a community, you have to have a consensus on what it even is. And in order to do that, you'd have to have people that have like a committee or a sense of some level of leadership within that. And there isn't that at all. So it's just this kind of free-for-all where anyone can, it's so blurred now, the definition of it is so blurred that there isn't any level of cohesion. And when there's no cohesion, there's nothing that can contain it. So anyone can say that they are and just make up a word, which is why we've also had that breakdown on words, where a lot of new words have been all fabricated and created. It's also very, very dangerous. Okay, it's so dangerous when you play around with the law of identity. It is a Hermetic principle, the law of identity. All right, when we do that, we break things down and it's all just like anything goes. And that's how grooming happens. That's how child molesters get in there. And this whole love is love stuff, well, that's what a pedophile would say. Okay, love isn't love. Love is truth. Truth is the highest form of love. Okay, so I hope all of this has made sense. And if you'd like to talk to me about this, you can. A lot of people that find my videos reach out and I talk to you just as freely as I'm talking right now. We can go into these types of chats and I can perhaps shine a light or share things with you that will illuminate what is already there. Because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you. I'm shining a light on what is there. Okay, this isn't something that's new. This has been going on for a long, long time. All right, so have no fear. Have no fear. All right, if you've got something to ask it. If you've got something to say, just spit it out. Just say it. Okay, there's nothing new under the sun. All right, so there is so much more I could say, but I'm just sharing this with you today because I felt called to. And it's something that obviously I live in every day. And I do have some friends which I've found which really understand this and they've lived through this. And it is very, very difficult to do. All right. So you're living in a very dysfunctional culture. And that's the key word on the word culture. It's a cult. You're in a cult. All right. There may not be a direct leader, but it definitely has an agenda and it definitely proselytizes. So understand there is more to you than devaluing yourself sexually. You have a brain and you have a mind and you have something to offer. Okay, and if you can find people like this, you can cultivate something beautiful and grow real friendships with people that are actually real, that aren't going to abandon you at their earliest convenience. Okay. Lots and lots of love, and I hope all of this has made sense. Leave a comment below. I will not delete anything here. I will always read it and listen. I'm always open to any level of chat and conversation. But if this video does get taken down, then just know that I tried, all right? Okay, be well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please reach out to me on my website if you'd like to purchase a spiritual consultation or an astrological chart reading. I'm very, very good at what I do. And I do it with love and I do it with truth. Okay? Okay, bye, bye, bye.